Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, the Timberwolves have officially announced the signing of Bones Hyland. The details of the contract are important, where the Timberwolves roster stands, why Bones Hyland, why he's the addition they're making, and the amount of space they still have to make moves yet this offseason. It's all upcoming next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hopefully you're having a great week so far. Today on the show, we're going to talk all about the Timberwolves' official roster moves. There's been some rumored moves that were coming, on the horizon. They are official. Bones Hyland is a Minnesota Timberwolf once again, and at least a partially guaranteed contract. I'll get into a bit about what we know and what we don't know so far about the signing and why that's important, what the roster looks like. And also, I'll start here. Why Bones Hyland? Why he's back, why that's important, why the team prioritized Bones Hyland in my mind. And then also Johnny Juzang, who, of course, we said a while ago the Timberwolves were potentially bringing in on a camp deal. That is official as well. So we'll talk about where the roster stands, what decisions still need to be made, and that's where we'll spend the majority of today's show. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So the Bones Hyland signing is official. And we'll get into if you just look at the Timberwolves, Timberwolves.com press releases for this, right? They have the Johnny Juzang signing. They have the Bones Hyland signing. The team never announces the terms of the deal, but of course it's always out there. And there's conflicting reports as to what Bones Hyland's deal is as of right now. So we'll get into that here in a moment. But regardless, I think it's highly likely that Bones Hyland is on the opening night roster, even if he's not on the roster for all 82 regular season games. That remains to be seen. I guess that's true of anybody, but given the contract, there's a real chance it's a partially guaranteed deal, similar to like what PJ Dozier signed last season, what we saw Austin Rivers sign a few years ago. Dozier was waived midseason. Rivers stuck around the whole season in his year. So there's a lot of different ways this thing could go. But why Bones Hyland? Bones is a former first-round pick who obviously has been a bit polarizing as a pro, and mixed results, I think, would be a good way of putting it. And of course, I should say, if you're not aware of this, Hyland was on the Timberwolves last season. He signed shortly after the trade deadline, shortly after the All-Star break, to a two-way deal, which meant he was not eligible to play in the postseason. And my take at the time was that the Timberwolves added him on a two-way deal so that they could have someone available in case they had an injury to, like, say, a Mike Conley or even a Dante DiVincenzo, somebody like that who is a higher usage, or at least not in Conley's case, but I mean, Conley was the only true point guard on the roster, period. Dante, obviously a higher usage scoring type guard. God forbid something happened to somebody like Ant last season. But the idea with Bones was not that he could have replaced any of those guys, but there's enough offensive talent there that he could come in, maybe win you a game if something weird happens. Somebody gets into crazy foul trouble, or there's multiple injuries, or somebody, is sick or something. Bones is kind of that, he gives us a shot at least. In a pinch, he can help us win a game that maybe we shouldn't have won otherwise. He can get hot and help us win, but you don't necessarily want him playing rotation minutes for an extended period of time. That's my opinion about Bones Hyland, and I'm not the only one. I mean, go back to every team he's been. Well, I guess he's only been on Denver and the Clippers before Minnesota. But that's the type of player he is a higher volume, a bit of an undersized combo guard. Really, he's a shooting guard in a point guard's body, and yet he's not a good enough shooter to be a true shooter. He's always been kind of league averagey. The last couple of years, he's been better than where he kind of lived in the prime of, I say prime, he's only 25, but his first couple of years in the league when he played more often for Denver and for the Clippers who traded for him. The 3-point shot has steadily improved. and for his career is 36.5%. He was a first round pick in Denver, and like I think the last draft that Tim Conley oversaw in Denver, actually, and became kind of a key piece off the bench for them in kind of the 21 to 23 range. And then the Nuggets traded with the Clippers at the deadline in 2023. The Timberwolves had rumored interest in him then, and then basically ever since then, he was waived by the Clippers last season, and Minnesota ultimately brought him in. Again, high volume combo guard, shooting guard in a point guard's body, good, not great passer, and not a good enough shooter to shoot the number of threes that he does. I mean, nearly 2/3 of the shots that he took the last couple of seasons were from outside the arc, and for his career, nearly 60% of his shot attempts are from outside the arc. And, a good scorer overall. And I think maybe he's gotten a bit of a bad rap defensively. He's not a good defender necessarily. I think he's kind of an averagey defender, and it's more about the effort level and the attention. Is he paying attention on the defensive end, which I guess is kind of sort of is linked to effort level. If the effort level is there, I think he can be a fine defender, but again, him being undersized doesn't help matters. So I still see Bones Hyland as an insurance policy, but not like a long-term one. If Mike Conley, if there's nothing left in the tank, if he gets hurt early, if they have an extended injury to Ant and they need somebody to run offense, etc., Bones can play and get you a win here or there, but he's a stopgap, lightning in a bottle sort of an option. He's not a long-term solution. So if a significant injury were to happen to a DiVincenzo or a Conley, they'd probably have to look elsewhere. But at least Bones Hyland is someone who's run an NBA offense and can get you buckets. That's my take on why they're bringing Bones Hyland in. And I should also say, I definitely think there's something to continuity, even if he was only on the team for, 3-ish months last season, if you include the playoffs. But even though he couldn't play in the playoffs as a two-way guy, he was on the bench. The bench vibes, the locker room vibes have to be fantastic for Bones Hyland. There is something to be said for that. And I think the case I made back when it was first reported the Wolves were likely to bring Bones back in some capacity. I think there's something to Tim Conley doing right by his guys. And I know we all rolled our eyes, and I was guilty of it too, and I stand by most of it, when Tom Thibodeau brought in every possible former Chicago Bull, which was great when it was Jimmy Butler and even when it was Taj Gibson, but then it was like, all right, over the hill, Luol Deng. Wasn't there a point guard, it wasn't, I can't think of which point guard. John Lucas III. How many former Bulls did he bring in? And it was a wide range of this makes sense to this makes no sense. The majority of the time that Tim Conley has done it with Minnesota, they're not expected to play rotation minutes. And I guess neither was John Lucas III in a Timberwolves uniform. But PJ Dozier was an end of the bench partial guarantee guy. That's a good example. You could say the same here really about Bones Hyland. It's the stakes are lower, and it's like, hey, I'm going to do right by my guys. I think they could provide something. I'm speaking now as if I'm Tim Conley. I can vouch for their character. I can vouch for their presence in the locker room, on the bench, what they're going to provide in practice, whatever. And if that's the case, that's a good thing around the league. Players talk, agents talk, and for Tim Conley to do right by the people that have done right by him, that he feels like have earned it, that isn't going to hurt him when it comes to free agency negotiations, contract negotiations, and even trade negotiations down the road. So I think that's all it's down the list of priorities. But if we're talking about realistically the 14th or 15th guy on the roster, I don't mind it. I don't hate it. I think that's not a bad approach from Tim Conley. I want to talk about the not conflicting reports, but the not concrete reports about whether or not this is a fully guaranteed contract, and then ultimately what that means to the roster itself, or for the roster itself. And then one other note on the actual reasoning behind the Bones signing that I had, and then we'll get into the Juzang signing and what the roster looks like here toward the end of the show. That's what we got for you on tap here today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at 5-Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with zero sugar and zero crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get that boost when you need it. There's tons of delicious flavors as well. And the best thing is how fast the 5-Hour Energy kicks in. Plus, it's sugar-free. You don't have to worry about that dreaded sugar crash later on. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It is time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade. Again, plenty of flavors out there to pick from. With 5-Hour Energy shots, get the favorites that you love, or be bold and try something new in-store and online at www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. That's www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. All right, one more note on why I think Bones Hyland was the selection over one of the other guys that was out there or still is out there. I've been, if you've been listening to the show for the last couple months, I've been clamoring for Malcolm Brogdon to get an opportunity in Minnesota. Now, he signed a deal with the Knicks, which I'm not sure that's even a fully guaranteed deal. One of several guys the Knicks have brought in. They had several roster spots and trying to add some veterans to that team with their new coach, Mike Brown. And I like Malcolm Brogdon because I thought he there's upside there. There's also a higher floor there, provided he's healthy. He can step in, provide rotation minutes, play both guard spots, give you some size, give you some defense, potentially some, again, offensive upside if things go well. And then like Malik Beasley, obviously a very different player, not a point guard at all, just a catch and shoot guy, not a good defender, but you know what you're going to get, and it's high level 3-point shooting. Those things are known quantities, which I talked a lot about on yesterday's show. The disadvantage to doing something like that is that certainly in the case of Beasley and probably in the case of someone like Brogdon, among other guys that are out there, those players would come in expecting to play at least fringe rotation minutes with an opportunity to see their roles increase depending on performance of others, injuries, etc. Whereas Bones Hyland isn't going to have that expectation. I'm assuming that's not the expectation that Tim Conley and Chris Finch set for him when they negotiated this contract, because the Timberwolves still have the number 8 overall pick from 15 months ago on their bench in Rob Dillingham. And there's obviously still hope for a guy who's just 20 to step into the future point guard role, as the Mike Conley successor. And if he doesn't get an opportunity because an over-the-hill version of Malcolm Brogdon is in his way, that could be detrimental longer term for Minnesota, or maybe even like medium term, like next year, like within the next 18 months or so. Whereas you sign Bones Hyland back and he's your insurance policy, as we talked about in the first segment, and can provide that instant offense that you might need at some point, given the circumstances. But there's no expectation that he's going to overtake Rob Dillingham. And Rob Dillingham isn't looking over his shoulder like, I know Malcolm Brogdon's supposed to be the 12th guy, but he's Malcolm Brogdon and he's won a 6th Man of the Year. And he's a better defender than me. He's a bigger guard than me. And I know Tim likes big guards. Like, there's not that uncertainty. It's Rob Dillingham is ahead of Bones Hyland on the depth chart. And that's just how this is. Like, that's how things go until they go otherwise. But it's not close enough where Rob's going to be looking over his shoulder. And I'm sure that went into the calculus for Tim Conley. Again, it's lower, not lower leverage, but lower stakes. Like I said earlier, with bringing some of these guys in when they know they're going to be the 13th, 14th, 15th guys on the roster. Joe Ingles is another example. Can he help you in a pinch in specific spots? Yeah. I mean, otherwise it wouldn't be worth giving him a roster spot, but he's not expecting to play rotation minutes at this stage in his career. So given that, plus the continuity, the bench, locker room vibes, etc., I think that it does make some sense that this is how the Wolves went about it, and why you could argue that Bones Hyland would have an advantage getting this roster spot over somebody who might be a little bit more accomplished or have a higher floor and a higher longer term ceiling, like a Malcolm Brogdon or a Malik Beasley, among others. I would argue that the floor for Bones Hyland is lower, but a short term ceiling may actually be higher. Malcolm Brogdon's unlikely to come in and win you a game when Mike Conley is resting on the second night of a back-to-back and DiVincenzo's in foul trouble and Ant is under the weather or whatever. And you need somebody to come in and just give you 18 off the bench. And you've got a fighting chance, to win on a Wednesday night back-to-back in Charlotte in February or whatever. Bones can potentially do that. And I don't think Malcolm Brogdon's, I mean, I guess Blake Beasley could, but I don't think Malcolm Brogdon's going to, for instance, or some other, Monte Morris or another backup point guard type is necessarily going to do that. Whereas Bones gives you that higher variance production potentially that could help get you there. I think all that's important. I want to talk a little bit about the contract stuff. So this was reported by the Timberwolves as a signing. They don't report terms of deals. And John Krasinski posted on X. I was going to pull the exact language. I believe he said Bones gets his full signing, his full, how did he say it? I'm going to find the exact tweet. I lost it here, but it didn't say fully guaranteed, but John's wording of it was basically, it seems like this is going to be a full contract. And then there's different reporting from Mike Scotto of Hoops Hype. So John's tweet was earlier in the day on Monday. He said, Bones Hyland has his full agreement with the Wolves in place, per league sources. The Wolves chose some other candidates to add depth to the guard rotation. Okay, so he says Bones has his full agreement with the Wolves in place. And then Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype posted a little bit after that. He said the Timberwolves signed Bones Hyland to a 1-year deal, which includes $425,000 in partially guaranteed money, league sources said. Okay, so John doesn't say it's fully guaranteed. He kind of suggests that it is. And then Scotto says it's partially guaranteed, which for context, a fully guaranteed vet minimum deal for Bones would likely be about it'd be a little over $2 million. I think 2.3 million or so. So 425,000 is like what, a sixth of that or something. For argument's sake, it's not this, but we'll say it's a quarter of that. So essentially the Wolves would then need a quarter season's worth of him on the roster in order to kind of justify him. It's not quite that clean, right? Like they could eat whatever they wanted to salary wise, but if it's really only guaranteed for a little over 400,000, like Jesse Edwards got like 90,000 guaranteed when he signed the 2-way in June or July or whenever it was. And then they went and waived him. So they flushed 90 grand. Then, what's 425 grand at that point, right? So they have the ability and the flexibility to move on from Bones Hyland if they were to, and I don't think they will make a trade. But remember, the Cat trade last year was actually a 3-for-1. They got Keita Bates-Diop back too. Bates-Diop was introduced along with Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo in the Twin Cities, and ultimately Bates-Diop was waived after preseason and training camp because they had one too many guaranteed contracts. So Bones Hyland, it's always possible if the Wolves were to pull off a 2-for-1 or whatever, or 1-for-2, or if they, I don't know, somebody else comes available at some point for whatever reason, or say they have a big man injury, they need to bring in a big man. It protects them a little bit with the ability to move on from Bones Hyland if they feel like that's necessary for any of the above reasons. Or if, they get into the season and it's not working out for whatever reason. They pivoted from PJ Dozier last year. I mentioned Austin Rivers. They didn't pivot from a few years ago. Who was the one 2 years ago? I guess Matt Ryan was a 2-way. I'm trying to remember. There was another partial guarantee on the roster that the Timberwolves were just like, all right, we'll shift gears here a couple months into the season. They could do that with Bones because it's a partial guarantee. So if that is true, and we don't know, like Spot Track, the site that I use for contracts that does a great job, and they're usually very accurate. They have this listed as a full guarantee. That, I'm not saying that means anything at this point. We'll have to keep an eye on it. But if it's a partial guarantee, it gives the Wolves a little bit more roster flexibility. And that's actually how I want to close the show, is by talking about the actual roster breakdown, how many open spots they have. They have more spots, I think, than you might expect. And, what's official, what's not, the 2-way deals and all that stuff as we draw ever closer to training camp. We'll do all that here next to close out the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel, our title sponsors at FanDuel. The NFL season is here. Week 2 is now in the books, and FanDuel is making sure that you are ready for kickoff this week with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Lots of fun action this weekend. I know the Vikings game didn't go according to plan on Sunday. A couple of fun games on Monday night, though. The Chargers-Raiders was at least entertaining. And then the Bucks Man, who did the Bucks beat? Bucks Texans. No, the Bucks lost. The Bucks did beat the Texans. That was fun though. That finish was. It looked like the Texans were going to win. The Bucks came back and won. Lots of fun games this weekend as well. Look ahead. The Vikings are actually favored by 2.5 at home against the Bengals, despite no JJ McCarthy, because the Bengals don't have Joe Burrow either. So that's a fun game. If you want to look at that and take the Vikings, if you think the Vikings can cover 2.5 with the backup quarterback starting, and also undrafted free agent from University of Minnesota, Max Brosmer, as the backup QB, presumably on Sunday, to Carson Wentz. And let's see what else. The Packers are favored by 8.5 at the Browns. I'd probably take Green Bay minus 8.5. I don't mind that. So lots of fun games to take a look at FanDuel. You can always do a same game parlay as well. You could just follow along, ride out your bet throughout the game as well. And of course, Thursday night football will be a lot of fun, as it always is. It looks like Dolphins at Bills. So a clear favorite in that game in Buffalo, but still, how bad can you get for the Dolphins? That's entertaining. You can check that out on FanDuel too. If you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, let's talk about the roster and where it stands right now. This is important to know what the Wolves have to play with in terms of roster spots, what's guaranteed, what's not guaranteed, and how many more bodies can Minnesota bring into camp. There's actually a really cool resource on hoopsrumors.com where they keep track of NBA roster counts, and it breaks it all down in terms of what each team can legally do in terms of their roster, and then what has been reported, what's official, etc. And they do a pretty good job of this. So the actual in-season standard contract roster is 15 players. There's also 3 two-way players you can have. And then in camp, you can expand that to 3 additional players on, camp deals, partial guarantees, non-guarantees, whatever the case might be. Minnesota often will bring in guys that ultimately they have interest in bringing into the Iowa Wolves program. And whether that's an Exhibit 10 deal, which affords a partial guarantee to the player, or whatever the case might be. So right now, Minnesota has 13 official announced guaranteed deals. They have 2 partial guarantees, Johnny Juzang, who we'll talk a little bit more about here in a second, and then Bones Hyland. I'm lumping him in there because we don't know if it's fully guaranteed, but it has been officially announced as a signing. So official announced signings, there's 15. The 2 that are non-guaranteed, in my opinion, would be Juzang and Hyland, but call it 15. There's 2 official two-way deals, which gets us to 17. And then Tristan Newton was offered a qualifying offer, and the Wolves have not announced that he's back yet, but it's been reported that he's received the qualifying offer, and it seems likely he'll be back. So we'll say we'll include Tristan Newton in the count, assuming he's on that third two-way deal. The other 2, of course, are this year's second-round pick, Rocco Zakarsky, and then Enrique Freeman, who is drafted last year by the Pacers, came off the bench, did a couple of free throws cold against the Timberwolves in a big spot last year. I did a whole half show on him a few weeks ago when the signing was announced. He was one of my favorite college players a couple years ago. A big rebounder, just knows how to play. Activity level's awesome. Undersized big man, but very effective. So he is on the other 2 ways. So that's 18 total guys, which means they have 3 roster spots remaining. 1 can be a guaranteed player, assuming Bones is not. And then the other 2 would be non-guaranteed deals or camp deals. So a number of guys out there that could be potential, could possibly be brought in. I mean, there's a lot of other names that have been floated around, or that have been, I should say, have surfaced as signing. Like the Knicks signed a bunch of guys last week. And there's so many veteran guys that are kind of hanging around that are looking for any sort of an opportunity in camp. You could guys like PJ Dozier last year with Minnesota, right? Like there's a plenty of different places this could go. And Minnesota still has 3 spots left and potentially 1 full roster guarantee standard contract left. I've been saying all along, I don't think Minnesota fills that. They haven't done that under Tim Conley for the most part. They like to maintain their flexibility. And we've seen him take advantage of having that flexibility. So wouldn't be a shock if they did the same thing again this year, leaving that last roster spot open. But that's where we're at now. So don't be surprised if you see Minnesota signing up to 3 more players over the next couple of weeks. But again, only one of them could even really be guaranteed, or that could end up being Bones Hyland. We don't know. Last thing, Johnny Juzang. If you missed it a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks ago, I don't know, I think it was early August, it was reported the Timberwolves were signing Johnny Juzang. It is a non-guaranteed deal, reportedly. He will just be joining the Timberwolves in camp. Remember, he was a undrafted guy, I believe, that ended up in Utah, and it was kind of fringy rotation for parts of the first 2 seasons. And then, was in the G League a little bit. And then last year actually started in 18 games, played in 64 for the Jazz, played 20 minutes a game. Not a bad 3-point shooter, about 38% overall. And I should say he's a big shooting guard. He's a 6'7" shooting guard. Doesn't rebound his position as well as you'd like him to, given the size, and he doesn't really create for anybody else. Really kind of a league average 3-point shooter who shoots 2/3 of his shots from outside the arc. You'd like him to do a little bit more off the dribble, and given his size and the position he plays, he's got to be a little bit better defensively. I think there's a chance the Timberwolves are thinking like, hey, look, we liked him as a college prospect, and bad defense is contagious. And the situation in Utah, Will Hardy's a good coach, but the non-competitive situation the last 3 years might have been such that it kind of dragged him down. And there's a chance he's just a kind of a fun body to have in camp in terms of, again, size, athleticism, what he's able to do as a complementary player. So they're going to take a look at him likely on a non-guaranteed deal is what all the reporting is. And I don't really have strong feelings about it because of how limited his impact is going to ultimately be. So be something to keep an eye on. I'd be really surprised if he made the roster, and there's a chance he ends up in the G League, but he's at this point, 3 years in. Not that he's old. Well, I guess he is already 24 and a half. He's going to turn 25 in March of this season. So a little bit on the older side for a guy who's actually only played in 102 career games. So at least it's a guy with like real actual NBA experience that'll be on the roster at training camp. And I'm sure we'll see some of him in preseason as well. All right. That's all I got for you today. Later in the week, we are going to have at least one guest on, maybe two this week, to talk about some bigger picture stuff here moving forward, some kind of off-season review, look ahead to the season preview as well. So make sure to stay tuned to the show. Of course, we're daily every day, Monday through Friday, really forever now until like next July. So you've got us Monday through Friday. Get into the season. We got postcast, the whole thing. Lots of shows coming your way here at the Locked On Wolves feed. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that the Locked On NBA Top 100 is here. I did a show in some form or fashion, talked about the Locked On NBA Top 100 every day last week, Monday through Friday. Did a couple full shows on it, some half shows. So go check it out. Of course, this list was voted on by the NBA host of the Locked On Podcast Network. So another way to say it, formed by experts that cover these teams and players every single day. You can find the full list on Locked On Sports today on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Don't miss my reaction shows from all of last week, so go check those out. And it was definitely a blast, and I love having our own list to be able to reference here throughout the season. Of course, Locked On Wolves podcast is also part of the very same Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.